Welcome to this week's Webcast Wednesday, a part of our SADD Super Safe Summer. This week our topic is mountain and rural driving, and our guest is Deputy Roblee from the Paso County Sheriff's Office. Welcome, Deputy Roblee, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Grateful to be here.
Thank you. So to get things started, since it's summer and many people will be taking road trips through the mountains and across the plains, what can we do to prepare before we head out?
So there's a lot of things that you can do to prepare. One of the first things I would mention is vehicle maintenance. And that's one of the most basic things that you can do, especially during summertime. It can be a lot harder for your vehicle to go in difficult places or long distances. So if you can, before you even leave the house and get into a bad situation, make sure that your vehicle is properly maintained. So making sure that your tires have the appropriate tread, make sure that your transmission fluid and oil fluids are all good to go. Make sure your brakes are good, because a lot of times when we're traveling in Colorado, it involves going up mountain passes and down mountain passes. So we want to make sure that your brakes are good. Frankly, just having confidence in your vehicle is going to make your journey a lot less stressful.
Oh, thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you. So while we're talking about going up and down those mountain passes, it's something we see here a lot in New York, and I'm sure all over that have mountain areas, you know, the steep grade signs. What do we do when we come to those steep grades, or there's those signage that tells us that the road is about to change?
So speed is one of the most important factors to take into consideration when you start going down a grade, because momentum is going to make your vehicle continue to go faster and build momentum. So one of the most important things to do is make sure that you're not riding your brakes, because that's going to burn your brakes out, and then you will lose the use of your brakes, which is pretty important when you're going downhill. You want to make sure that you're following the speed limit. Even if it seems a little slow, it's for a reason. So take trust in the government officials and experts that have made that speed limit, just to make sure that they follow that. Also, something to keep in mind is, you know, how wide the road is. So you want to make sure that, you know, if it's a narrow road especially, and it's downhill, you have to give yourself a little extra reaction time if you come up upon another driver. So you have to make sure that, you know, you're not overcorrecting if you come up to another driver, speeding, that way you don't have time to react, things like that. Just some other things that I can mention that are Colorado law. So Colorado has what's called prima facie speed limit laws, which means at first appearance, the speed is reasonable and prudent. And basically for mountain highways, the mountain highway is going to have a speed limit of 40 miles per hour. Mountain roads are going to have a speed limit of 20 miles per hour. And these are in areas that you don't necessarily see a speed limit posted. That's the guideline to go by. Also, another important thing about going downhill is coasting. So that's actually against Colorado law as well. If you're going down a downgrade, you cannot have your transmission in neutral. And this also applies to buses and trucks. They can't have the clutch disengaged while going down, because you're going to have less control over your vehicle.
Thank you. I didn't know some of that.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Roblee. My name is Kevin. I'm from California, and I have a question about how about driving up those passes? What should we do?
Excellent question. So even if you're going uphill, it's going to cause extra stress and demand on your vehicle. So you might have to use a lower gear to go up the hill. It helps your vehicle just manage that hill and the extra stress that it has. Another important thing is to keep an eye on your temperature gauge on your vehicle, and that is how hot the engine is. If you overheat your car and blow up your engine, you're going to be stuck. So it's really important to watch that gauge, otherwise you run that potential. So some things that you can do to remedy that and make sure that you're not overheating your vehicle is, once you start ascending the roadway, you can turn your air conditioning off. That's going to help. And then another option too is, if your vehicle does start to overheat, you can actually turn on your heater, and that is going to assist the engine cooling down. Ultimately, if your car is starting to get pretty hot, the best thing that you can do is pull over, let your car cool down, but you do not want to remove the radiator cap or anything from your vehicle when it's hot. It could cause it to explode and cause some pretty devastating injuries.
So, Deputy Roblee, quick question for me. Speaking of going up and down these mountain roads, I was going to a campground and the road got kind of narrow and I came across another car going the opposite direction. Who has the right of way in those situations, going up and down those hills when the lane might not be safe for two cars to pass easily? Who has the right of way?
Okay, yeah, so we have a lot of those roads, especially here in El Paso County. So basically the vehicle going downhill has to yield to the right of way of the vehicle going uphill. And that's why it's really important to obey the speed limit, because again, it gives you reaction time. And then you also have to be aware of your surroundings. So try to look ahead when you're driving on these roads. And if you see dust from another vehicle or any sign of a vehicle coming towards you, start planning on how to be able to safely pass each other on that roadway. So if you see a car coming up and you're passing a turnout now, why not take advantage of that turnout, wait a few extra minutes for that car to pass, and then proceed on your journey. Another important thing is if you do come up to another car, communicate with them. So understand who's going to pull over where, and just kind of communicate on how you guys are going to accomplish that safely so that nobody gets hurt.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Speaking of passing, how do I pass safely on roads in the mountains and even on like those 2-lane roads in other rural communities, like in the plains?
So the biggest thing about passing is being able to do it safely. So first off, take into consideration of why you're trying to pass to begin with. It may seem like that person is going slow, but maybe they observe a hazard up ahead that you haven't been able to see yourself. So pay really close attention before you even start that maneuver to pass. But if you are making that decision to pass, make sure that you're not doing it on a curve where you can't see cars coming the other direction. Make sure you're not doing it on a hill where, again, it's going to be obstructed view and you don't want to cause a head-on crash if something were to happen like that. A lot of times in Colorado, we see people riding their bicycles, and they're on main roads riding their road bikes. And one important thing is if you're going to be passing a bicycle, the same rules of the road apply. In fact, Colorado state law says you have to allow for at least 3 feet from the widest part of your vehicle and the bicyclist. Now, 3 feet isn't a lot of space, so I always take due diligence if I'm going to pass a bicycle. I give so much space that it's not going to make that person worry, because that could be a devastating, if not a fatal injury for them if something happens. So why not slow down, give yourself a little extra time, a little extra space, and always do care and caution.
So we know that speed is always a factor. What are some other common dangers that we might encounter in mountain roads or out in rural areas? And then how do we handle those situations?
So one of the biggest things in our county, we kind of have a variety here in El Paso County. We have the urban area, but then we also have the rural area. So we see a lot of animals that come into the roadway. And that can be a scary thing because it's an animal, you don't want to hurt them, you don't want to kill them. But when it comes down to it, if it's an animal jumps in your path, the best thing that you can do is just hit the animal head on. Because if you veer off because of the animal taking you off guard, one, you could veer off the side of the roadway and not see maybe a cliff or a tree, and you could cause a lot of injury and damage to your vehicle that way. But then if you veer on the other lane of traffic, not looking far ahead, you could veer into the path of another vehicle. So you kind of have to weigh the odds there. What would I rather happen? You don't want to accidentally hurt somebody else. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to, kill this animal if I hit it. But there's so much more risk choosing not to hit it at that point. So one of the recommendations that we say with that is if you do get surprised by an animal, try to slow down as much as you can, but take your foot off the brake just before the impact. And you'd be surprised how durable wild animals are. Working patrol, I've been a patrol officer for about 10 years, and I can't say how many calls we've received of I have hit a deer and we get there and the deer is gone. So they're quite durable. They work their way through injury. Some other hazards that you got to be worried about are just road conditions. So a lot of times when we're in the rural community, we're going to be on dirt roads. And one of the things that come along with dirt roads are ruts in the roadway. So ruts are kind of a tricky, dangerous thing. So ruts are created, in essence, by speeding on the roadway. And unless they're made flat, again, by DOT or the county road maintenance, they can be really dangerous, because even if you're going the speed limit, the rut will cause your tire to bounce and potentially have your tire leave the roadway, which is going to have less traction for your vehicle to maneuver. So you can kind of feel that when you're on a rutted roadway, you start to turn your wheel and you're not being able to turn, it means you're going too fast. So you need to slow down. So that's one of the other huge things. Looking at my notes here, give me 1 second. So other things to look out in the roadway is going to have to do with weather. So especially in Colorado and some places in California, we're all over the place. So it can be snowing and then completely sunny, or vice versa. So we deal with all the weather elements, it seems like, in one day in Colorado sometimes. So snow, it's slippery, it's wet. It's going to cause you to lose traction on the roadway. It could cause you to get stuck if you're driving through the rural areas and it's not an area that's plowed. It's really easy to get stuck in the snow. So that's something to be worried about. Rain. Sometimes in Colorado, we have these monsoon rain that come through, and it is just, several inches of rain that fall in a rapid amount of time, and there's going to be lots of flooding. So flooding is an important factor, that if you're in the mountain or rural areas and you're going to be crossing a creek, you don't want to take your vehicle through a flooded area and possibly have your vehicle swept away. So all important things that come to weather related to rain and snow. Also something that we find here in Colorado is fog. So fog is so frustrating because it's going to eliminate your being able to see at a normal capacity, but then it's also going to make the road slippery, and a lot of people don't realize that. So it's creating this fine moisture on the roadway, and if the temperature is just right, it is going to ice over the roadway, and you're going to have zero ability to control your vehicle if you're not driving appropriate for any of those conditions.
That's all very good feedback, Deputy. Thank you for that. Considering the topic we're talking here today, what kind of equipment should we have in our car or vehicles?
So there's a lot of basic stuff that you want to carry year-round, regardless of weather. So in Colorado, we're at a higher elevation. So especially if you're not from around here, if you're traveling higher into the mountains, you want to carry a lot of water with you. Water is so critical. Especially if you plan on being outdoor, doing outdoor recreation, hiking, walking, you could become dehydrated pretty quickly, especially with the dry climate that we have. So it's important to just pack a lot of extra water and plan for how many people you're going to be traveling with. It's always good to have extra, especially when it comes to water. It's always good to have snacks, right? You don't want to get hangry when you're out there hiking, or God forbid your vehicle breaks down. Now you have, some snacks. You don't have to immediately panic because you don't have some supplies. So you just have some of those basic comforts to get you through so that you don't panic. I always have a emergency supply vehicle or bag in my vehicle. And that includes jumper cables. I have a emergency kind of foil blanket. Non-perishable snacks are good to keep in there. So I have like an MRE, since those last for quite a while, a flashlight, a medical kit, a small shovel, emergency flares are all good things to pack with. And you can just put in a small backpack and keep them in your car. That way you're prepared, even if you weren't planning on going on a long journey. Something else to keep in mind as well is if you're traveling with children, so especially infants. So there was a story that has been told to me numerous times when I came out to patrol about the blizzard that we had. I think it was back in 1997, and there was a young family that got stranded out in the snow, deputy went out to try to rescue her, and he ended up getting stuck. And so they were in this vehicle together, and they were with an infant. Well, an infant has some critical care needs, that being, milk of, some sort, and the mother didn't have any of those supplies. So thankfully the deputy had a protein shake, and they were able to nourish the infant, and they were out there for a couple of days all together waiting to be rescued. So it's just something that's really important. You got to think about everybody in your party, not just yourself. Some other things to keep in mind are, we're really dependent on cell phones, especially in this day and age. So if you're going to be traveling to an area that doesn't have cell phone reception, there are different applications that you can download that will have GPS and downloaded maps. Because if you lose cell phone service, you're going to be able to lose your map. So if you can download stuff ahead of time, you don't have to worry about having cell phone service. GPS devices are really good about doing that. Also, ranger stations are going to be positioned throughout the state, especially in our recreational areas. A lot of those have informational pamphlets that you can go in, and again, planning ahead. Some other things that you can do as well with the cell phone, and actually we'll talk about that here in the next question, so I'll hold off on that.
Perfect. Well, that's a lot of really good ideas of things that I am going to get to put in my car soon. So thank you. And then speaking of cell phone service, what should we do if we are out traveling and our car breaks down while we are out of that cell phone service area?
So first off, it's going to depend on your level of confidence and knowledge of the area. So there's quite a few areas that I drive in my patrol vehicle, especially in this county, that I'm very familiar with. So I know that I won't have cell phone service here, but I know in a half a mile, I would have cell phone service. So I myself feel comfortable traveling a half mile to go get service. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that and you don't have the familiarity with the area, the most important thing is to stay put with your vehicle. A lot of times in our recreational areas, there's going to be other people using those areas. So don't be ashamed or afraid to flag somebody down and ask for help. Even if you don't trust getting in a car with them, have them travel down to where they have cell phone service and request help for you. And something that's kind of unique, and now it's not 100% reliable, but again, if you're in a bad situation, it's worth a try. Cell phones, if you dial 911, they actually, regardless if you have cell phone service, they will reach out to any available tower to access the 911 emergency system. So if you initially see that you don't have service, dial 911, you might be able to get through. And then also there's text to 911 technology out there as well now, that you can text 911 and at least give them your location. Sometimes it's easier to get a text message through than an actual phone call. So those are just some new technology that our 911 system has been kind of slowly upgraded. And like I said, it's not 100% reliable, but it's better than nothing. Also, something that's kind of cool is, especially here in El Paso County, there's volunteer groups, 4x4 groups that will come out and rescue you. Now, that's something that you have to kind of do your research and see if you're willing to take that, because there are risks. It's not like using a tow truck company that has insurance and liability. If something's damaged on your vehicle, it's kind of up to you at that point to handle it. It's not going to be the person that was trying to help you. So you have to determine if you're willing to take that risk. And those are some things to plan for if you do break down.
Thank you so much, Deputy Roblee. If anybody has any questions, I forgot to mention this at the very beginning. If you have any questions, if you want to put those over in the chat, that would be great. While you're doing that, if you have any questions, I wanted to also comment that Deputy Roblee mentioned several Colorado laws that apply to traveling in mountains and rural roads in our state. The laws may be different in the state that you are in or a state that you're traveling to. So it's a good idea to be aware of that. And also, if you're curious about something, to look that up before you go. And that way and you're not doing something that is against the law.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I actually
All right,
want to add one more thing to the car breaking down scenario, or just
Sure.
traveling in general. So again, technology, it's our friend and our enemy. So there are location sharing apps that you can share with your friends and family before you leave on your journey. That way they can track you along your journey. Even if you lose cell phone service, it's going to know the last place that you had service. And it's also important to verbally communicate with your friends and family what your plan is, what roads you're going to take, and what time you're leaving, what time do you anticipate getting somewhere. So that way, if you are overdue, there's a pretty good time frame that can be provided to law enforcement and to search and rescue on how to find you. And I think there was a question that popped up.
There is. What if you drive off the road?
So Lauren, can you clarify your question? Like drive off the road and damage your vehicle, or get stuck because of the roadway conditions on the side of the road? Is that what you're asking?
So it's something we see, I'm not going to say fairly often, but often enough that, someone's veered off the road enough that they've either gone into a guardrail or somehow have their car incapacitated on a hill or off the side of a mountain. What do you do in that instance? You get out of the car, what do you do?
So it's going to be dependent on the roadway. If it's a really narrow roadway, I would say stay in the vehicle. But now if your vehicle is damaged to the point where you're losing fluids or there is a hazard, I would get out of the vehicle and I would position yourself on the other side of the guardrail, just to protect yourself from oncoming traffic, and then try to use those resources of calling for help at that point.
Dylan also wanted to know, for the 911 texting feature you described, is that more on a national level or specific to 911 in Colorado?
So I would have to ask our dispatchers. I think it is going to be going national, but I know for sure it is in the El Paso County Teller 911 affiliate. So Colorado right now, I know for sure.
Awesome. Well, that looks like all of our questions. So I wanted to thank you, Deputy Roblee, for joining us today and teaching us about how to stay safe in our mountain and rural communities. Definitely a different driving skill set that students and adults need to be aware of. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And in closing, come back next week when we're going to be talking about pedestrian and motorcycle safety tips. So thank you all for joining us and have a great day.